Special event alert.
Let's run.
Zip up your flight suit and run. This is Late for Changeover. I'm Marty Smith, your host, and with me is Eric Perrott, Jake Wall, and Mike Johns.
Hey,
greetings, fellas.
See you guys. Now that I'm recording, this is fantastic. Okay. So we're using a new software, but your host is a moron and didn't know how to record.
Got a little bit of a technical difficulty there.
Yeah, it was a
What are you
technical
gonna do?
idiocy. So let's pick it up. This is going to be a short episode, so let's pick it up. Gentlemen, I need some help on this one. This is from military.com. Space Force Guardians can now choose to work part-time under a new policy change. So the Space Force can start allowing some Guardians to choose between full-time, part-time active duty service under a new law passed last month as part of the NDAA, which was signed by President Joe Biden. They say, because the Space Force doesn't have reserves or National Guard, that they can just choose to be full-time or part-time, whichever one you want to choose.
Well,
So-
Airman Snuffy, me, I'm just going to work Monday and Thursday, and I'm going to go 2 to 4, and that's all I want to work.
Well, Monday, if you just worked Tuesday and Thursday, you would get a 4-day weekend every week.
The article wasn't quite clear on what days I can take off.
But I'm
Well,
saying
and I
that
want full health care.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I don't think anybody knows what clear would be on this whole thing.
It's so silly because the whole article talks about they describe what it means to be a reservist or a guard by not saying reservist or guard.
Yeah.
They just say you can be part-time or full-time, whichever one you choose. Space Force, you come and go when you please.
Because it's Space Force is relatively small. They don't want the hassle, right, of standing up a guard or a reserve. However, there's a significant amount of our manning day in, day out that comes for Space Force that comes from guard and reserve personnel.
Absolutely.
Like all active duty is, I swear it feels like they're 25% guard or reserve sometimes at least.
But the big benefit that these units have, the old 2 Swiss, the old
380th,
19 or 2
16th,
SOPs,
380th.
yeah, all those. What they really benefit in is years of knowing the system. And when you have active duty guys rotating in and out, and you have a guy who's been doing the same job for 6-7 years now, and he's like, "Don't worry, I got it. I know how this. I can train you up."
Yeah, I've seen this before.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
So-
I still agree with what Vern was saying earlier on the explanation of some of these guys that are joining won't understand that, hey, it's about service. It's not about me going to school on Tuesday and Thursday and calling it a day.
But, but that's what the reserve signs up for. They sign up for that
there's still a
TA.
service commitment too.
when
It's
they're
like-
when
I
they're
agree.
on orders, right?
Yeah. But
You know what I mean?
the guard and reserve, they're all like, hey, 1 week in a month, and then what, 2 weeks a year. That's
the
all
selling-
you ever hear about it.
Selling point.
That's the selling point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
then
can
if you're
remember
on
this-
orders, you get TA, you get healthcare, you get all that stuff. So there's a good deal, but then if you're going to
Until it's
force
not
me
when you're tasked to deploy.
Well, these
Yeah,
guys
but
have been
this-
thinking about this for a long time. I can remember sitting in meetings with squadron superintendents, 5 years ago, going through this and having them pick my brain on the various things and expectations and stuff like that if they were to implement something like this. So hopefully in those 5 years, the turnover rate hasn't been so hard that they've missed a lot of those lessons learned and have actually thought through this and created a plan so that when Airman Snuffy does come up and says, hey, I'm going to need every Tuesday and Thursday off for the next semester so I can, study and go to school and do my finals and all that kind of stuff. The expectation is already set up front that, nope, you're activated, you're on orders for the next, 6 months, a year, 4 years, whatever it may be. But it's, the expectation is clear. And it's not something that you just, walk up on a Monday and go, hey, sir, can I do this, that, or the other? And then it just happens.
Well, let me ask you, Mike. I was out in 13, but I remember, and I can't quite remember the years. I think it was 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there, where they had a change in leadership or something like that, and they were forcing the reservists to do long stretches of active duty orders. Is that right? Or
It was SMF, the Space Mission Force.
that's it. Yeah, that's it. Where they had to come on for like a quarter, like
Yeah. So what
4
was
months,
happening
right?
was the Space Force was attempting to deploy in place their people.
Yeah.
And what they wanted to do is they would have a crew come on and work crew operations for 4 months at a time. And then they would get 4 months off to go and do what
That's
they
it.
considered advanced training.
Right.
Well, basically that meant you needed to have, if you were having 4 crews running 12-hour shifts, you needed to then have 8 crews. So then you can have one part of your crew force, let's call it crew force A, in operations, and crew force B would be in advanced training, and then they'd swap after that 4 months, and they would just keep going back and forth. So what they were having the reservists do was they were basically saying either do this or get out,
Right.
or find a different unit. But you have to come on at a 4-year stretch when we tell you to. And there was, some people
4
did
months,
leave.
not 4
4
years.
months,
4
yeah.
Or
months.
4 months. Yeah, sorry, 4 months. And some people did leave, not very many, but a few did. A lot of people had to go back and, kind of reorganize what they were doing with their life. And, maybe they didn't take a class at this time, or they didn't take one job. They took another one.
Sure.
But there was definitely some reorganization to life for those reservists that came on. And the Space Mission Force was pushed down from up high. That was the Space Command Initiative at the time.
Oh, it was a pilot program, was it? It was how the fighter squadrons did it.
Well,
Or something
so
to that effect.
not
right?
not necessarily. It was meant to, there again, deploy forces and give
Yeah, that's
our
wordsmith.
crews over
That's
to.
just wordsmithing.
Hold on, stop, and give our forces over to a combatant commander, and not have them all the way administratively everything chopped over. And so that the combatant commander then had charge of those crews, and those crews wouldn't get pulled to pay taxes to, like, the wing plans and program shop and stuff like that. If they were on crew, they were untouchable.
Yeah.
And I also heard some reports that there was very little advanced training going on.
At the time, I don't know where it's at now. It did start to evolve over a period of time, but I would say for the first, 5-6 rotations, crews were sitting around just hanging out a lot of times, looking for detail type work.
Yeah.
They basically stayed to their monthly recurring training type schedule, whereas they were basically supposed to be setting up trainer time for themselves and going in and doing training rides. But, as soon as these officers came off crew, they were getting picked to go do all the nonsensical officer stuff, because they needed officers to do all that nonsensical officer stuff. So these guys were running around handling, all the different taskers that were coming down from the wing, the group, as opposed to training their people.
Yeah.
And that left a lot of, junior enlisted and stuff like that just hanging out in offices, checking email and doing food runs.
And knowing they don't have a mid for 4 months. They're like, great. Yeah.
Well, certainly makes more sense and an understanding of why the VA can't track their money. Right? We can't even do. I'm just saying, it's just another failed program, man. That's what I'm saying. It just
unfortunately, yeah. Yep.
It's one of those programs that briefs up high, great,
really good.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, fuck, this sounds great, but the execution is not clear, or not forced enough, or not monitored enough. But
you
well, and in
didn't
my
get a
opinion,
lot
they
of
did it the wrong
buy-in,
way. They didn't
honestly.
focus on the advanced training up front. They focused on getting crews out to the floor and doing the deploy, what they call the dip and dwell, deploy in place, and then the dwell period was that advanced training time. They wanted to get that out so then they could come and show people, hey, look, these guys are deployed in place right now. Don't worry about these dwellers. They're doing advanced training, but no one ever really went and dug down into the advanced training. What they needed to do was build that advanced training up front, so when you actually moved into the dip dwell cycle, the dwellers automatically had something to go in and do. But instead, they just threw it at the dwellers and said, you guys figure it out, and then took their leadership away to do leadership taskers.
Well, and I don't know how much. I mean, you're on a console, you're running checklists, you can't deviate from the checklists. So I don't know how much advanced training you can do. You can have all your weapons officer training down to everybody else. And you're like, oh yeah, tactics, yeah, space defense, space offense, but you still got to release that missile.
Well, an advanced
Yeah.
training defined as operating in a contested, degraded, or operationally limited environment, and CDO. So what they would do is, what the theory was you would go into advanced training and look at foreign threats, and then train against those foreign threats. So jamming, ASATs, physical attacks, stuff like that. However, that training wasn't built at the time. So these guys, they threw really a bunch of staff sergeants and airmen at the problem that didn't have the knowledge background to build that stuff out. And then that all revolved around the new concept, at least at the time, to the Space Force crews, of mission planning and debriefing. They had to do all that all at the same time. And it was kind of a calamity, because there again, they threw one weapons officer at the problem who had 17 other taskers from the wing and the group to deal with at the same time. So he was running around for 12 hours a day trying to just put out fires. He wasn't just sitting in a skiff, writing up new training material and scripts and stuff like that. That was left to the crews that there again didn't have the background of the training. And that's where they got it wrong with the Space Mission Force, was doing the dip dwell cycles first, vice the advanced training first. And
to equate that to the flying world, Vern's right? But they didn't think about that. Think about how many hours the average pilot spends flying and practicing and training prior to deploying.
Sure.
Right. And that is stagnant. That training is different. Like, it's stagnant. It's like developed, been there for years. That's not the same way on space. But to get back to the original thing of the figuring out what to do with the dirty reserves and how manning is going to be happening in space, a lot of the 380th manning was people that got out of active duty, but in other branches. So at the 380th,
right.
We had every branch represented except, I think, for the coasties. So you had Army, true. Navy, Marines that got out after their 4, 6, 8 years, took 4 years off, kind of like you did, Marty, took 4 years off, and then came back as a dirty reservist. Then how is that going? That manning, that manpower is not going to be available if you go solely Space Force, right?
And if you recruit, I mean, imagine that. I can't believe they produced this article, because imagine what you just said. So, what's their manning document look like? Do they have to now add 20% more onto their manning number because they anticipate these many people will be, hey, I'm going to be part-time. And you're like, oh, shit, well, we got to cover for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you got the guy who's like, you know what? I just want to be part-time on a shift. I'll do 4 hours active and I'll do 4 hours off. That's my part-time.
It can't be like that. And that's the other thing. Like, we're just speculating at this thing, but they're cutting themselves short by removing that whole talent pool from coming in, because you'd get guys that had crazy experience and leadership experience that the average space guy or Air Force guy is not going to have, right? You'd have a guy come in as a staff sergeant, but then was an E5, E6 in the Army. He's leading 10, 15 guys in crappy situations, doing briefs, doing all this stuff. And then you come in to the Air Force, and especially as a reservist, you're lucky if you've got 1, maybe 2 people to supervise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But that guy's got a wealth of knowledge that you can get and be like, hey, what's going on with this? How do we solve this problem?
Right. And that's what, but here's also the hidden advantage.
That talent.
The hidden advantage of the reserves is that you can't, and I knew many people, I hired many people straight in, right, who didn't have any military time, or they had gotten military and they had gotten out and they're like, hey, I'd like to get into space. Well, come and join the reserves because we'll send you and we'll get you trained and we'll get you a clearance, and then you can add to the mission and then go chase your job. It was perfect. It was a win-win everywhere because we got manpower. He got a high-paying clearance job, and that all started with the reserve recruiting process. Now, God, it's so short-sighted. It is so crazy short-sighted with this part-time, full-time advertisement thing. It's so dumb.
Well, I don't know how you guys' experience was with the other services, but I love my guys that came from the Army and Marine Corps.
Amen.
They were some of the easiest to train. They dealt with all the bullshit great.
Even the Navy, which I was shocked at.
There was only
ex-Navy is always glad to be ex-Navy.
All my Army guys that I had come over, they were always really solid. You told them to move out, and they moved out. And
Eric, do you ever work with any reserve cops?
Oh yeah. They came in on their 2 weeks.
Did you
to be honest with you, no. To be honest with you,
yes, you did.
Yeah, you did.
Stop talking for me. You don't know.
Dirties. Called them dirties, didn't you?
No, man. To be perfectly honest, those guys were better trained in instances than we were because they spent all day long training. They were better prepared in those instances.
Yeah.
As far as cops went.
Did you have a lot of civilian cops who were also reserve or guard? Air Force
majority of them
really?
were.
Yeah.
Same with the firemen. Like the firemen, especially on base, they're not seeing anything. If you have active duty fire guys on the average base, they're not seeing or responding to things day in, day out. But you have the reserve guys that are volunteer firemen or active firemen downtown, and you're like, oh, they're seeing so much. They're responding to freaking fatal car accidents, house fires, all that crap.
Experience levels is huge.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I worked a mission out in Washington, D.C., and I was the only active duty guy with Army National Guard and Air Force reservist. And there was the whole unit probably had, 110, 120 people to it. And they're, again, the only active duty guy there. So one thing I learned about the reservists at the time was the vast array of things they did. I mean, you had guys that, were chefs in their off time. We had Secret Service agents. We had DEA intel guys. Yeah. You had other dudes that, worked in finance. You had this wide plethora of people that knew so much. It made those mid-shift conversations go, really interesting just because you had so many different perspectives being thrown at you. And, I think that's what the Space Force is trying to do with this initiative is try to get that vast experience and, all those different backgrounds together to hopefully, look at a mission from a little bit different of a way to hopefully improve things.
That's the first thing we've said that made sense.
Well, I understand
experience level to one role.
Oh, I understand that. I understand the end state, but how do you get there? If you don't have a reserve thing, is it all going to be active duty? And here's the other thing about the reserves too. And we've all been active duty, and I don't know why it's an active duty unspoken mindset that we hate contractors and we hate reserve and guard. I don't know why. When you're active duty, you're like, you're not doing it every day like me, right? Yeah. I don't know what that is. But
even the AGRs you talk trash to.
Yeah, I know.
The active reserve
but
guys
if you take a step back and you go, oh, I'm stepping into the space unit. This reservist has been here for 10 years.
Yeah.
And you're like, how am I going to know more than him? But there are those who's like, oh, I know. It's like, okay, I was here when we were IOC, buddy. But go ahead. Yeah. Do what your 6 weeks out at Vandenberg taught you. And
I definitely think the experience level is huge with those guys for sure.
I don't know. It just seems again. It seems to me like Space Force has kind of, as you said, Mike, outkicked their coverage on this. Is like, put this article out. Look how good this is going to be. Have we thought this through? It's like, doesn't matter. Put it out because they haven't thought it through, and this is going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess, especially. They keep touting that they made numbers last year, which the Air Force or Space Force did. Space Force and Marine.
First year?
But I don't
Here's the thing.
know how they're going to keep going. You know what I mean?
That's it. They kept their numbers up and they brought over a ton
Yeah.
of
Right.
other
Good
branches.
point. Yeah.
And then they brought over a ton of relatively senior other branches, and they had no mindset or no ability to bring them up to that base space level, like we've talked about before. Those guys are going to get their clearance and see, oh, I was in the Army and I really didn't have a job in the real world. Now
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'll come over. Yeah.
I can just punch and get a job
Right.
being an security escort
Big
and
money.
get paid. Exactly.
Right. $40
And I'm
an
not
hour.
trash talking. I'm not trash talking you at all, Eric.
No,
We had a
you're
handful
right.
of guys
Shit.
that
Yeah.
would work that at
Yeah.
Two Swiss on their off shift.
Yeah.
Right.
So when they were on their 4 days off, they would come in civvies and they would read a book and just be escorting contractors into a secure facility
and make a ridiculous amount of money for what they were doing
for a part-time job.
Yeah.
Well, and I still do that for my current company. When they call me occasionally, they just need someone to sit in the new skiff that's being built and escort freaking these guys working. I'm like, I'm your guy.
Yes.
I'm
not like you're out digging a
today.
hole.
Nope.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Sit there.
So I don't know. I get
You're not
this.
on escort duty in the desert.
No.
It's air conditioning.
I bet you did a lot of escort duty in the desert, didn't you?
It's a decent paying part-time job. Can't go wrong.
Yeah. It's one of those. Again, it's another one of those articles that the Space Force is so eager to do something, but they haven't really thought it through. Now, maybe that they should have just said, "Hey, don't put this article out. Let's figure this out before we put this article out." But they're like, "No, this sounds great. This sounds great."
Well, and those guys could have all the answers to the questions we've been asking.
Could be.
You know,
yeah, it could be. I doubt it.
It just wasn't well written.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, the reporter that they talked to didn't ask the right questions because they didn't know what the difference between the guard and the reserve is.
Right.
There's all sorts of things that could be going on. And like I said, they've been working on this stuff hand in hand with the reserves for at least the past 5 years.
Well,
so hopefully they've got a lot of these things ironed out.
I hope. Mike, you're the greatest shill for the Space Force I've ever heard. So it's fucking, they should be paying you. But talking with General Petty, when he worked at the Pentagon in a guard role, he said he had to really push his way into some of these meetings to get heard, a guard perspective. Now, a lot of this sounds like an active duty perspective on the reserves and not somebody going, "Hey, look at the benefit that we bring you." I mean, and going back to that conversation about SMF, Mike, SMF came up because, well, my take on it is if the reserves weren't strong in defending the reserves when they were talking all the commanders on base, then the reserves would get run over. And when you have a commander who's like, "Well, reservists, you're just going to have to suck it up and take 4 months of active duty time." He's like, "That's not what I signed up for." Well, then go find another unit. It's like, well, wait a minute. You want me to take my $100,000 a year contractor job and do 4 months at an E5 pay? So that's where the reserve components, I think, in my opinion, is not considered and pushed up into the argument. We are a combat multiplier, but don't treat the reserves as active duty because they're not. They have the knowledge, but they don't have the same. They didn't sign up for it, and they don't have the same motivation that the active duty does.
And the activation outside of a named operation was also kind of a big deal. If we weren't in, basically the reserves are supposed to be there when you're fighting a war, then you go to your reserves. The global war on terror changed all that stuff.
Well, it muddied the waters on stuff.
Yeah.
Very much so. And they're like, "Hey," because I remember when they were first, when we were first activated, 03, I think, or something like that. But that was short. 60 days maybe or something like that. and then they're like, okay, we've got enough people. We're not sitting,
Constant
extra
vigilance.
taskings. Yeah. We want to have 10 people down there constantly sitting. So then they realize, okay, we can still do normal ops here and still support the war effort. So.
Well, and technologies and stuff like that came along to help alleviate some of those needs.
Yeah.
And,
Good point. Good
yeah.
point. So, okay, that was a good. I'm glad we got that discussion in. I want to go back to now to everyone listening. Marty Smith screwed this up because he didn't start the recording. But I do want to do cover the. I want to watch this again because I want to watch the guy carrying the beer. So there was a rogue wave that hit Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. So here we go.
Look at this girl with standing there.
Yeah.
New video shows the
Where did she go?
terrifying
She
moment
disappeared.
a massive wave hit a U.S.
But
military base
Davy
on
Jones's
a remote
locker.
island in the Pacific.
You good? Now listen to what she
The
says.
water ripping the doors from their hinges, taking 2 people with them. Those inside climbed on tables, clinging
Do you see
to
anybody climbing
anything
on
they could
tables?
reach. Moments later, a second wave
Nope.
rushes in,
Do you
knocking
see anybody
out windows.
grabbing anything they
Thankfully,
can except
only
his
minor
beer?
injuries were reported, but the Army says at least a third
That
of
girl
the
had
base,
a slightly more
located
than
in the
minor
Marshall
injuries.
Islands in
She
the heart
got
of the Pacific
smacked.
was flooded.
By the
This
water
is gonna
and the
go down in
door.
Quad's history
Right.
books
Yeah.
as one of its most challenging times ever in its 80-year history. We will get through this, and we are settling in for a marathon of recovery ahead.
The tiny nation is on the front lines of climate change due to rising sea levels and more frequent storms. A Pentagon study has warned increases in sea level
Man, that's gotta be a
will
hell of an
result in
assignment.
greater wave-driven run-up
Quad.
and island flooding,
Yeah.
threatening the fresh water supply as soon
I
as
wonder how it compares to
2035.
Guam.
ABC News traveled to the
There is no
capital in
comparison.
2018
I
to
know
see
you're a big
mitigation efforts
Guam
in areas
advocate over there.
including new
Guam's
concrete
big.
seawalls.
I mean, it probably
But one
sucks for
local
finding
official
things to
had
do,
this
Just,
warning
you know,
for the
especially if
rest
you
of
want to
the
lock
world
yourself
when
in
it
your
comes to
dorm
the
room and
dangers
play video
of our
games all
changing
day.
climate.
But
Yeah.
if you like the ocean,
Yeah,
and
here's
shit,
this guy,
that's
right?
great.
But you're next.
Non-mission personnel were
let's
evacuated
hear
from
that
the
guy
island.
one more
The
time.
flooding is close to nearby personnel were evacuated
I mean, the ominous nature of this guy.
You're next.
from the rest of the world when it comes to the dangers of our changing climate.
We may go first.
Are you looking for the colonel?
You're next.
No, that guy.
That was it.
Non-mission
next.
personnel were
So the majority of that was blaming it on climate change, but that was
Pretty
cool.
wild wave. No
Yeah,
doubt.
thanks for
Crazy.
sending that out, Jake. That was cool.
It's caused by rough weather.
Rough weather.
No,
Yeah.
it's
I
caused
guess
by
you
the
can't-
motion in the
I
ocean.
guess you
We've already
can't
been
s-
over this.
Yeah.
You can't say
Russia,
rogue
yeah,
wave,
sorry.
right? Because
Yeah.
rogue wave is unexplainable. I think,
Well,
right?
that's what it says. The huge wave was caused by rough weather.
Yeah, I mean these things do. There are actual things called rogue waves that
Yeah.
do.
Science. You can't
Yeah.
argue with it.
I think Hawaii gets them every once in a while. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
no, we're good. I was listening to Adam Carolla, who reminded me of. Did you ever see the press conference when they were talking to the admiral about all the people that they were putting on? I think it was Guam. I can't remember where it was that they're.
Are you
they're
talking
moving all
about
this-
when Congressman Johnson said Guam
Oh,
was
yeah.
going to tip over because?
Yeah, that
the,
was it. That was it.
yeah.
Yeah. And he's like,
Dude, the admiral, his face was delightful.
that was awesome.
With the current deployment, do you think there's a opportunity
Chance
for
of
the
a-
island to capsize? Or
What a bonehead.
He
Admiral's
should
like-
he should have pulled out something like it's like we've built some special submarines that are under their supporting
pushing,
Yeah.
actively
Yes.
pushing up on the
and they
heavy
can
side of the
sense
island.
when it tips one way or another. So,
Well, don't worry about him breathing because we put some tubes up to the surface. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
he
right.
could
That
have really
was a-
paced that down a lot.
that was
yeah.
a congressman who did that. Right?
Yeah, Congressman
Oh.
Johnson from Georgia, if I'm remembering correctly.
My
He was also the dude that they found like $35,000 in cash from a bribe or something like that. And that's why. he
Oh,
did
that's
running
it's
again. I think that's the same guy. Could be.
not like
I could
They
be-
probably,
gold
They probably still
gold
couldn't
bars
get
in
rid
your
of him.
in your closet in your suit pocket
Yeah.
or anything like that. 35,000 is nothing.
That's why that nothing gets done in Congress. Attaboy.
All right, Jake, this one's right up your alley. So from Air and Space Force magazine. Look at that.
Oh,
A misplaced flashlight sucked into an F-35 engine caused $4 million in damage.
Ouch. I thought cops only cause that much damage.
yeah.
That's a lot of damage for a
That-
cop.
That's
You
to
guys
their
are-
own facilities.
That's an M16 being sucked up or something.
You guys are just limited to cars. You know what I mean?
Yeah, carving your name in a dashboard or
And
something.
your Dodges that you're running over,
Dude,
barriers.
it was
and
only
stuff.
a flashlight that got sucked up. We could have done that easily.
Dude.
So, according to a new accident investigation report, a handheld flashlight left inside an engine inlet of an F-35 fighter was sucked into the engine during a maintenance ground run at Luke Air Force Base, Arizona, in March of 2023. So, almost a year they got that report out, causing nearly $4 million worth of damage. The mishap in question took place on March 15th of 2023 when a 3-person maintenance team was completing a time compliance technical directive on the F-35. Do you know what those are, Jake?
Yeah, everything is timed in theory.
Oh, is it?
Like we would do runs and practice runs when we were loading, and they were like, okay, you only have a certain amount of time to load this configuration.
Okay.
The same thing, just in case you need to turn the planes quick
Yeah.
and get them back up there. So there's time requirements for everything.
All right. So that's just built into it. TCTD?
Normally, like all of our toolboxes have foam cutouts. Like I'm talking.
Oh, so yeah.
Back in the
got
day, what years and
Right.
years ago, I don't know how it is now, but we had foam cutouts, and the bottom was a bright color, and the top was a subdued color. So if you had a component missing from that drawer, it was bright, it would stand out.
Oh, okay.
And you had to
Right.
put all your stuff in the toolboxes or account for all your stuff
Yeah.
prior to leaving that area or being done with anything, and then you're good. Like, man, I know one of the maddest times I've ever been or my 2-man was at me is I put a wrench in my pocket, like just a normal socket wrench
Yeah.
in my pocket. And then we were turning in all the tools at the end of the day. And I had taken the load truck, the jammer, back to Age to get maintenance on it.
Yeah.
The socket wrench had fallen out of my coveralls pocket and stuck between the seat.
Oh no.
And everything's engraved. Everything says basically this toolbox on this place and this,
Yeah.
And I go back and we're turning in tools and he's like, I'm missing a wrench. And I'm like, I got nothing. Miserable. That 8-hour shift turned into a 12-hour shift
Oh man.
we were nights, so the planes were going to take off. We were scrambling those planes, and we had touched almost all the planes.
Would they not
They
be
were
cleared to
about-
go if you couldn't?
No,
find
they're
it?
grounded if you can't account for that tool.
Yeah,
Because
you
it
got
could
fired-
be-
you got fired on the
It
flight.
could be a flashlight in the intake, or it
Yeah.
could be on the
Yeah.
flight line,
Yeah.
and an F-16 is going to go by and suck it up.
Right.
I'm guessing this flashlight
Man.
this guy probably had in his pocket that, it was something he bought personally. It wasn't something that was accounted for like you just described.
But we're
he
not
pulled out
allowed
the
to take
flashlight
any
do
of
whatever
that
activity he
stuff.
was doing, set it
Yeah.
down to talk to his buddy or something, forgot about it, turned around and they walk out. And,
And that's a big no-no, though. You can't use anything that's not accounted for on the flight line. So you can't use a Leatherman. You can't use your own flashlight.
Oh,
You
really?
can't-
You can't take any of that.
No, the only
man.
tools allowed are the tools that are accounted for.
That
Well,
makes sense. You don't want to leave that
It-
shit.
I mean,
it's fine.
You don't want to close up a panel and have something in there
Yeah.
and then it just thrash around and cut half the wires.
Well, let me read. I thought it was a pretty decent description of how it happened, and you can understand it. So, a 3-person maintenance team was completing a time compliance technical directive on the F-35 to quote install a metering plug into an engine fuel line and conduct a leak check on the new metering plug while the engine was running. After the plug was installed, one maintainer conducted a tool inventory check. Before, another maintainer conducted a quote before operation servicing inspection of the engine. To do so, the maintainer used a flashlight to inspect the engine inlet and left it on the lip of the intake. The maintainer who performed the engine inspection then conducted an engine run for 5 minutes to check for any fuel leaks.
Boop.
During that time, the cockpit showed no indication of foreign object damage to the engine, but as the engine shut down, the team reported hearing abnormal noises. The maintainer who conducted the engine run performed another inspection and identified the damage, while the maintainer who completed the first tool inventory check performed another and noted a missing flashlight.
Ah.
See, so ultimately the engine sustained damage to its second stage rotor, third stage rotor, fifth stage rotor, sixth stage rotor, fuel nozzle, bypass duct, high pressure compressor, high pressure turbine, and fan inlet variable vane. Value $3,933,106.
Ouch.
So,
If that was an A10, it would be one bent blade.
are even the turbofan's
Or
blade
it
like?
probably wouldn't even sucked up anything. That flashlight would have been still chilling right there, like nothing.
It had been spinning around, but then you turn it off and it's just like drop back out.
It's wedged in there. It's like ding, 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 ding. Bonk.
Like spike spokes.
Yeah.
So they did it. They did the inventories at the wrong time, right? Or he did it before, and then he went out and did something after,
Yeah.
and then it was like, "Oh shit, I'm missing a flashlight." Did you do the inventory already? It's like, yes. Shit. So
Son, you're going to be in the Air Force for the rest of your life.
now we used to always joke in the Army. Now I know the guy. I know a guy who left his M16. He leaned it up against a track, and the track took off, and it caught it up in the treads and just destroyed it. Right? He brought it back in a bag. But an M16, in 1990 was, $700.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, you're docked $700. So much out of your out of your check for a month.
And wait, so that's one thing to make sure that civilians understand. And I'm sure we have like one or two. They will literally, if you do damage to government property, they will dock your pay.
Yeah.
Like
Report
it's
service.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, done. You're irresponsible. You destroyed this piece of government equipment. You have to pay $700, and it will come out in one lump sum, or it will come out in
Years
5.
of service.
Yeah, exactly. They're getting their money back out of you.
Yeah. Now, what do you think that they're going to do to these two guys for a $4 million? I mean, they're obviously not going to get money out of them, right?
Well, they could stop contributing to 401k.
Well, they can't kick them out because they've already got problems with recruiting.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you might be the safest maintainers ever, right?
They're going to back shop. They're getting kicked off the flight line. They're going
LOC,
to back shop.
You get reduced and you go to a back shop, but I mean, how many chiefs have told that story? They're like, oh yeah, I got busted 3 times and I still made chief. Because you outlasted everybody else.
Yeah. I wonder if they did lose a stripe. I mean, that's
they got to,
that's a
right?
lot of
they're not going to
damage.
recoup that money from them. So they
the minimum had to be an Article 15. At a minimum.
Right?
Well, because there was written procedures and you didn't follow them.
God, I remember we had a division that put out because we had privates who would keep trying to jump in the Humvees and just start them without warming the glow plugs.
Oh yeah.
And they would swell the shit out of those things. And they were like, it happened so often. We had a commander who's like, if I find that problem, once again, whoever did it, they're paying for that engine. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if only we had a representative that was experienced in paperwork and LOCs and all that stuff. I mean, but he's down in Florida, putzing around. So.
Oh,
he's in Texas. He's in Texas.
I'm talking about Teapot. Teapot's an expert.
Oh
on
yeah,
receiving.
Teapot. Yeah,
on receiving.
That's true. Good point. Right.
I thought you were poking me in the eye again.
No, I'll poke you in the eye later.
Okay.
But I'm talking about Teapot. I'm throwing him under the bus because he's not here.
Yeah, he could give us
local
a lot
representative.
of the ins and outs on that.
He's had a number of those letters. Yeah.
So
I think he's had all the letters. So I'm with him.
Well, since I cut off, well, we didn't have great discussions on that, the beginning part, but let's close this episode out with a really good history. Eric, you want to do that? Or you want me to do it?
Oh yeah.
Let me do one, and then I'll let you do yours. How's that?
Oh,
I'll make
double
mine quick.
history.
Don't do the Pueblo.
I'm going to do the Pueblo. You know why?
No, we
I'm
can't
double
have double
history.
history.
Watch.
This is a good day.
Yeah, do
I'm
the Audie
excited.
Murphy. I'm gonna, Eric. No.
I will notify the media and let them know we're having double history. 'Cause
Oh,
everyone-
Marty, it's gone to your head already. Oh, gone to your head. The power
Well, here's
corrupts.
what I'll do. I will just mention it. On this day, 1968, the Pueblo was taken by North Koreans because they were caught spying, collecting intelligence. They were fired upon, taken prisoner.
No.
Good history for you space flunkies.
That's Tonkin Gulf, man. That's fake.
Oh.
Fake news.
That's what got us into the war. That's what got us into Korea, right?
Come on.
Isn't that what got us into Korea?
I'm not going to say that. I'm not.
What do you mean you're not going to say it?
All right, read your Audie Murphy then one.
No, I'm going to let you read the Audie Murphy.
No, it's
No.
your Mr. History.
I don't want to read it. I don't want to read it.
He gets a sweet tan line on his ass and he gets all froggy, man.
I don't want to read it. I had a thing, and you didn't let me do it.
We talked before the
pooped
show,
on it.
and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'll do Audie Murphy," and now all of a sudden you're defiant. What's the matter with you?
Because I want to do the Pueblo, man. I worked hard on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you
International
mean you worked
waters.
hard on that?
Well, I went and found it.
He's got Wikipedia up right now.
I went,
Dude. He pre-read
Bird.
that even, so it didn't sound bad.
Don't let all that water drown you out.
Figuring out how to pronounce freaking French and North Korean things, man.
All right, so I will say that I do like this story.
All right. Thank you.
I will read.
Lame.
So,
How dare
guys,
you,
back
dude.
in World War II, Audie Murphy. Those of you familiar with Audie Murphy?
Yes.
Big Western star after the war, did a number of movies, big time. So on January 23rd, 1945, the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division's 30th Infantry Regiment advanced through, I'm not going to name the type of forest because I can't pronounce it.
But before that, this was during the Battle of the Bulge, right?
No,
Yes.
it was part of the Bulge, but it was a specific battle done.
No, but it was during the time when
Freddie,
the
I'll
Germans
show you which
pushed.
part of the bulge.
I can see how important history is to you, Jake. Cut it
For
Eric's
out.
all your Mr. History Bulge needs, please go to the OnlyFans.
And if you go to his recent post, he'll show you the Mexico Bulge.
This week only 10% off for women over 60.
That's the only ones I'll accept anyway. Come on.
Yep. Nice.
Come on. So on 23 January, the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division's 30th Infantry Regiment advanced through a forest near Holtzware
Good choice.
when it was suddenly attacked by a large force of enemy tanks, tank destroyers, and infantry. The 30th was caught in an open ground and was unable to dig into the frozen earth, ending up mangled by the attacking Germans in order to a draw. To fill the gap, the Americans ordered the 15th Infantry to take its place. The very next day, on the southern edge of the woods, German tanks and infantry hit the regiment's Company B hard, wounding 102 of its 120 enlisted men and killing all of its officers, with the exception of
As they should.
Lieutenant Audie Murphy.
Audie Murphy, baby.
All freaking 5'4", 160 pounds of him.
I know he was a tiny dude.
And
Little dude.
an
He was stout
LT.
at 5'4". 5'4", 160 is a stout little guy.
And he joined at 16, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
The same day, Murphy led what was left of his company in the woods, where they too were unable to dig in any kind of foxhole. They worked through the night, but couldn't make any progress in the snow and cold. The next morning, Murphy was reinforced with 2 tank destroyers from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion and used them along with 5 armored vehicles to form a defensive position. It was better, but it was still weak, and they could see the heavily defended village at Holtzware from this spot. It was now 26 January 1945. Murphy had made the most of what was available, but was informed that his reinforcements had not yet arrived. and they wouldn't make it that day. At 2 p.m. that day, 6 tanks and 250 elite German mountain troops moved out of the village towards their position. Murphy only had time to get a phone call and a call for artillery before the shooting started. It turns out that the road to a German victory in the Colmar pocket ran through the road his company was holding. The American tank destroyers opened up on the incoming German tanks immediately, but the fire was ineffective. They were taken out almost either by enemy tank rounds or poor maneuvering, which scattered surviving anti-tank troops into the forest. The only silver lining was the M10 tank destroyers' mounted guns, which tore into the German infantry. But even that didn't last long. Company B's machine gun crew was hit next. Murphy knew his unit couldn't hold this vital stretch and ordered his men to fall back into the forest. He would cover their retreat while directing artillery fire. With the Germans advancing and his carbine out of ammunition, Murphy spied a burning tank destroyer and its remaining 50 cal machine gun. Instead of going back into the forest, he climbed aboard the turret and began pouring fire into the oncoming enemy advance. He believed the tanks could not advance without infantry, so he began mowing them down. Murphy was right. As he cut down enemy troops, the German tanks were forced to fall back to their own tree line. He fought on as enemy tank shells and artillery exploded around him. For an hour, Murphy was obscured by smoke and fire, and firing the machine gun stopped only to reload, call in artillery fire, or recover from the exploding 88 millimeter shells. After what must have seemed like days, the clouds parted and he was able to get close air support from the Allied air power. In the face of all that firepower, the Germans finally began a retreat toward the village. It was a great timing for Murphy because his phone to Allied artillery suddenly went dead. He left the tank destroyer and rejoined his men in the relative safety of the forest. After he reached the tree line, the turret on which he stood for the entire hour blew up, tossing it in sky high. Refusing to be evacuated or deterred, Murphy then began a plan to counterattack. Retaking their original position from the remaining Germans, Company B held its ground through that night and reinforced the 30th Infantry Regiment, capturing the village the next day. Had Murphy not made his stand atop the burning armored vehicle, it's likely the entire company, undermanned and demoralized, would have been annihilated. Murphy was promoted to first lieutenant and received the Legion of Merit for his leadership during the Colmar Pocket operation. On June 2nd, 1945, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch, commander of the 7th Army, presented the 19-year-old Murphy with the Medal of Honor for his actions outside Holtzwer.
God.
By the war's end, he would famously receive every medal for valor the United States offer, along with 3 Purple Hearts for his trouble. The little man was a badass.
That's,
No
I
doubt
mean,
about it.
you hear about him, but you don't
Yeah,
realize, Jesus.
Yeah, sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, that's all. Go ahead.
We talk shit, and rightfully so, about lieutenants,
Yeah.
right? And those are early to mid 20s lieutenants. That's not a freaking 19-year-old LT
19.
with sped up military training. Like, basic back then and initial training was sped up because of the war. I mean,
Yeah.
that guy is ridiculous.
I mean, it seems like, and I think they wrote Captain America before that, but if you're talking about a guy who joined at 16, he was what, 5'6"?
Yeah, he was short.
Yeah,
Short
small
guy.
guy. I wonder if they took that for Captain America model, to try to join in. I mean, Jesus.
How tall was the LT?
5'6".
5'6".
And he stayed on that tank. Now, this is from his movie, which I've seen the clips from the movie. It's a 1955 movie. It's just he shoots, and then the German guys go, oh, and they fall over. There's no real special effects. But
Eric said he stayed on that tank for almost an hour.
An hour.
Only having time to reload and
Call in
air
artillery fire.
support.
It's like, where was everybody
and then
else?
Go. That's what I'm saying. You didn't have one NCO going, Private, get back up there and help that damn LT.
It's like,
Unless there was like 3 privates feeding him ammo and stuff
maybe
the whole time,
maybe.
and then the LT is the only one that got recognition.
But there's no other radios. It's crazy.
Nothing.
The movie, he says he orders everybody out. He didn't want in the movie. He orders them.
Right. Yeah. So you got the old salty NCO. It's like, hey, the 19-year-old said stay in the woods. So we're staying in the woods.
I will tell you guys, when I was there in Colmar, he has a road, a highway through the city of the village named after him.
Yeah.
And everything. I sent you guys some pictures, but where the actual tank was set, there's a memorial and his story behind the memorial. So it's really cool.
That is cool. Yeah, that is super cool.
To this day, they don't forget him because they would be speaking
Audie Murphy Day,
hardcore German. That's right.
Well, it's amazing that Germans didn't know, right? And he's mowing down their infantry, and that their doctrine was tanks don't go without infantry. So he looks back and he's like, all our infantry's gone, so let's pull the tanks back. It was single-handedly
big time
deterred that attack in time for air and everybody else to support him. That's crazy. That's amazing.
The hell of a story.
And when was his action where he stumbled upon the Germans and shot them all when they didn't realize he was to their flank? That was like a year earlier, I think.
It was
earlier
before.
That year, I think.
Yeah,
I can't
it was
remember.
before.
When he get lost taking a piss, and then he's like, "Oh, bad guys."
I don't know what led up to it, but I know he kind of he caught a firing position like off guard, and he shot them, and then he got the machine gun, and then it's like, hey, I'm along the whole front. I'm on the side of their whole front, and just kind of went down the line and killed all these Germans. And it was like, holy shit.
And by the way, what made it worse is it's in the middle of the winter. It's up to their ass. They're up to their ass. In
oh,
snow,
this one, Colmar Pocket?
Snow.
Yeah,
well, even his action before that was in
Oh, it was.
Oh, yeah, because nobody could dig a foxhole. Nobody could dig a fighting position.
So
can you imagine just that situation? You're coming up on enemy troops, and all of a sudden you start receiving fire, and they're like, dig in, and you're like, tink,
nothing. Yeah,
tink.
Nothing. Right.
Yeah. Scratching holes in there.
Yeah. Right.
I'm starting to stack dead bodies in front of me. Yeah.
Dude, the mentality.
Yeah.
I was
Korea
listening
too.
to an audiobook.
Yeah.
An audiobook about the Texas Rangers, and there's one guy that's talking about getting ambushed by a group of Indians, like Kiowa or something like that. He literally rides his horse full speed, finds a divot in the plains, wraps the stirrup around, or the whatever, what's it called? Fucking stabs the horse because he didn't want to waste a bullet, and the smell of blood freaks out other horses. So he kills his own horse.
It was his reins.
And drops it. Yeah, the reins. Drops the horse so he has cover.
Yeah.
He's
the horse as cover.
What? And then he's like, I'm going to try to get a horse. First of all, I'm going to try to survive. And then I'm stuck in the middle of freaking mid-Texas, anywhere in Texas.
Yeah.
And I was like, what in the hell is going on? Like, these are different men.
Yeah.
He's like, this is my friend and companion, and screw it. We were buddies once.
Well, and there might have been 5 guys who tried that before and it didn't work.
Exactly.
He's the one that did work, and he's like,
one victory.
Exactly.
You did the horse thing? I tried that. It didn't work for me.
I shot in the ass with 4 arrows. One cheek. Can you believe it?
Oh, shit.
I think they were messing with me.
Well, good on you,
All right,
Audie Murphy. Good on you, Texas Ranger. And good on you, gentlemen. I think we're at end-up today.
All right.
On behalf of all of us here, I'd like to thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe, and let us know how we did in the comments. And make sure next week that you are not late for changeover.
Hey, that was
closer.
Yeah.
Man, thanks for the week, and I'll see you next week.
Keep up those leg days, Eric. I saw those pictures. You've been skipping.
Why are you letting him get away with killing your legs there, Eric?
Dude, all right, here's what I'll do, Jake. I'll invite you to a workout, big guy.
Whew, please, man. I got a leg day waiver.
I'm part-time on leg day.
Start time on leg day. I identify as a guard when it comes to leg day. You gotta have state funding for that shit.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.